Hello and welcome to day 11 of the Earth Aquinas, where we are reading his Summa Theologica in 1 year. We are continuing today in the first part, question 14, God's Knowledge. You can follow along with me on newadvent.org/summa. Article 6. Whether God knows things other than himself by proper knowledge. It seems that God does not know things other than himself by proper knowledge. For as was shown in Article 5, God knows things other than himself, according as they are in himself. But other things are in him, as in their common and universal cause, and are known by God as their first and universal cause. This is known to them by general, and not by proper knowledge. Therefore God knows things besides himself as general, and not proper knowledge. Reply to Objection 1. So, to know a thing as it is in the knower may be understood in two ways. In one way, this adverb so imports the mode of knowledge on the part of the thing known, and in this sense it is false. For the knower does not always know the known object known according to the existence it has in the knower, since the eye does not know a stone according as to the essence it has in the eye, but the image of the stone which is in the eye. The eye knows the stone according as its existence outside the eye. And if any knower has knowledge of the object known according to the mode of existence it has in the knower nevertheless knows it according to the mode of existence outside the knower. Thus, the intellect knows a stone according to the intelligible existence it has in the intellect, inasmuch as it knows that it understands, while nevertheless it knows what a stone is its own nature. If, however, the adverb so be understood to import the mode of knowledge on the part of the knower, in this sense it is true that only the knower has a knowledge of the object known, as in the knower. More perfectly, for the thing known is the knower, the more perfect is the mode of knowledge. We must therefore say that God not only knows all things are in him, but by the fact that they are in him, he knows them in their own nature, and all the more perfectly, the more perfectly each one is in him. Reply to Objection 2. Further, the created essence is distant from the divine essence, as the divine essence is distant from the created essence. But the divine essence cannot be known by the general created essence, as said above. Therefore, neither can the created essence be known by the divine essence. Thus, as God knows by his essence only, it follows that he does not know what a creature is in essence, as to know what it is, which is to have proper knowledge of it. Reply to Objection 2. The created essence is compared to the essence of God as the imperfect to the perfect act. Therefore, the created essence cannot sufficiently lead us to the knowledge of the divine essence, but rather to the converse. Reply to Objection 3. Further, proper knowledge of a thing can come only through its proper ratio, but God knows all things by his essence. It seems that he does not know each thing by proper ratio, for one thing cannot be the proper ratio of many diverse things. Therefore, God has not a proper knowledge of things, but a general knowledge. For to know things otherwise than the proper ratio is to only have a common and general understanding of them. Reply to Objection 3. The same thing cannot be taken in equal manner as the ratio of different things, but the divine essence excels all creatures. Hence, it can be taken as the proper ration of each thing according to the diverse ways in which the diverse creature participates in it and imitates it. On the contrary, to have a proper knowledge of a thing is to know them not only in general, but as they are distinct from each other. Now, God knows things in that manner. Hence, it is written that he reaches even to the division of the soul and the spirit, of the joints as well and the marrow, and that this is a discerner of thoughts and intents of the heart. Neither is there any creature invisible in his sight. Hebrews 4 verses 12 through 13. I answer that. Some have erred on this point, saying that God knows things of himself in only the general, that is, only as beings. For as fire, if it knew the nature of heat, and all else, in so far as they are hot, so God, through knowing himself as principal being, knows the nature of being, and all other things in so far as they are beings. But this cannot be. For to know a thing in general, and not in particular, is to have imperfect knowledge. Hence our intellect, when it is reduced from potentiality to act, acquires first a universal and confused knowledge of things before it knows them in particular, as proceeding from the imperfect to the perfect, as is clear from physics. If therefore the knowledge of God regarding things other than himself is only universal and not special, it would follow that his understanding would not be absolutely perfect. Therefore, neither his being, therefore neither he would be, excuse me, therefore neither would his being be perfect. And this is against what is said above. We must therefore hold that God knows things other than himself with a proper knowledge, not so far, not only insofar as being is common to them, but insofar as one is distinguished from the other. In proof thereof, we may observe that some, wishing to show that God knows many things by one, bring forward some examples, as for instance, that if the center knew itself, it would know all the lines proceed from the center, or if light knew itself, it would know all colors. Now, these examples, although they are similar in part, namely as regards universal causality, nevertheless they fail in respect that multitude and diversity are caused by the one principle, not as regards that which is the principle of distinction, but only as regards that which is in that in which they communicate. For the diversity of colors is not caused by light only, but by the different disposition of the diaphaneous media which receives it, and likewise the diversity of lines is caused by their different position. Hence it is that this kind of diversity and multitude cannot be known in its principal power by knowledge, but only in a general way. In God, however, it is otherwise. For as was shown above, whatever perfection exists in any creature wholly pre-exists and is contained in God in an excelling manner. Now, not only what is common to creatures, i.e., being, belongs to the perfection, but also what makes them distinct from each other, as living and understanding and the like, whereby living beings are distinguished from the non-living, and the intelligent from the non-intelligent. Likewise, every form whereby each thing is constituted, in its own species, is a perfection, and thus all things pre-exist in God, not only as regards what is common to all, but as regards what distinguishes one thing from another. And therefore, as God contains all perfection in him, the essence of God is compared to all other essences of things, not as common to proper, as unity is to numbers, or the center of a circle to the radiating lines, but as perfect acts to imperfect, as if I was to compare a man to animal, or six, a perfect number, to an imperfect number contained under it. Now, it is manifest that by a perfect act, imperfect acts can be known, not only in the journal, but also by proper knowledge. Thus, for example, whoever knows a man knows an animal by proper knowledge. Whoever knows the number 6 knows the number 3 also by proper knowledge. Therefore, the essence of God contains in itself all the perfection created in essence of any other being, and far more God can know himself of all of them with proper knowledge. For the nature proper to each thing consists in some degree of participation in the divine perfection. Now God could not be said to know himself perfectly unless he knew all the ways in which his perfection can be shared by others. Neither could he know the very nature of the being perfectly unless he knew all the modes of being. Hence it is manifest that God knows all things with proper knowledge, and their distinction from each other. Article 7. Whether the knowledge of God is discursive. Objection 1. It seems that the knowledge of God is discursive, for the knowledge of God is not habitual knowledge, but actual knowledge. Now, the philosopher says, quote, the habit of knowledge may be reg- may regard many things at once, but the actual understanding regards only one thing at a time. End quote. Therefore, as God knows many things, himself and others, as shown above, it seems that he does not understand all at once, but discourses from one to another. Reply to objection 1. Although there is only one act of the understanding in itself, nevertheless, many things may be understood in one medium, as shown above. Objection 2. Further, discursive knowledge is to know the effect through the cause, but God knows things through himself, as an effect is known through its cause. Therefore, his knowledge is not discursive. Reply to objection 2. God does not know by their cause, known as it were previously, effects unknown, but he knows the effects in the cause, and hence his knowledge is not discursive, as shown above. Objection 3. Further, God knows each creature more perfectly than we know it, but we know that when effects and their created causes, but we know the effects and their created causes. and thus we go discursively from causes to things caused. Therefore, it seems that the same applies to God. Reply to objection 3. Rather, God sees the effects of created causes in the causes themselves much better than we can, but not still in much a same manner that knowledge of the effects caused in him by the knowledge of the created causes, as is the case with us, and hence his knowledge is not discursive. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, God does not see all things in their particular or separately, as if he saw alternately here and there, but he sees all things together at once. End quote. I answer that. In the divine knowledge there is no discursion, the proof of which is as follows. In our knowledge there is a twofold discursion. One according to succession only, as if we have an actual understanding, as when we have an actual understood anything, we turn ourselves to understand something else, while the other mode of discursion is according to causality, as when through the principles we arrive at knowledge of conclusions. The first kind of discursion cannot belong to God, for many things which we understand in succession, if each is considered in itself, we understand simultaneously if we see them in some other thing. For instance, we understand the parts in the whole, or when we see different things in a mirror. Now God sees all things in one thing, which is himself. Therefore, God sees all things God sees all things together and not successively. Likewise, the second mode of discursion cannot be applied to God. First, because the second mode of discursion presupposes the first mode, for whoever proceeds from the principles to two conclusions does not consider both at once. Secondly, because to discourse thus is to proceed from the known to the unknown. Hence it is manifest that when the first is known, the second is still unknown, and thus the second is known not in the first but from the first. Now the term discursive reasoning is attained when the second is seen by the first, by resolving the effects into their causes, and then the discursion ceases. Hence, as God sees his effects in himself as their cause, his knowledge is not discursive. Article 8. Whether the knowledge of God is the cause of things. Objection 1. It seems that the knowledge of God is not the cause of things. For Origen says on Romans 8:30, quote, whom he called, he also justified, end quote, etc. Quote, a thing will happen not because God knows it as a future, but because it is future. It is on account known by God before it exists, end quote. Reply to objection 1. Origen spoke in reference to the aspect of knowledge to which the idea of causality does not belong unless the will is joined to it, as said above. But when he says the reason why God foreknows something is because they are future, this must be understood according to the cause of consequence, and not according to the cause of essence. For if things are in the future, it follows that God knows them, but not that the futurity of things is the cause of why God knows them. Objection 2. Further, given the cause, the effect follows, but the knowledge of God is eternal. Therefore, if the knowledge of God is the cause of created things, it seems that creatures are eternal. Reply to objection 2. The knowledge of God is the cause of things, according as they are in his knowledge. Now, that things should be eternal was not in the knowledge of God. Hence, although the knowledge of God is eternal, it does not follow that creatures are eternal. Objection 3. Further, quote, the thing known is prior to knowledge, and is its measure, end quote, as the philosopher says. But what is posterior and measured cannot be a cause. Therefore, the knowledge of God is not the cause of things. Reply to objection 3. Natural things are midway between the knowledge of God and of our knowledge. For we receive knowledge from natural things, of which God is the cause by his knowledge. Hence, as the natural objects of knowledge are prior to our knowledge and are its measure, so the knowledge of God is prior to natural things and is the measure of them. As, for instance, a house is midway between the knowledge of the builder who made it and the knowledge of one who gathers his knowledge from the house, and the one and the one who gathers his knowledge of the house from the house already built. On the contrary, Augustine says, not because they are does God know all creatures, spiritually and temporal, but because he knows them, therefore they are. End quote. I answer that. The knowledge of God is the cause of things. For the knowledge of God is to all the creatures what the knowledge of the artificers is to the thing that made his art. Now, the knowledge of the artificer is the cause of the things made by his art, from the fact that the artificer works by his intellect. Hence, the form of the intellect must be the principle of the action, as heat is the principle of heating. Nevertheless, we must observe that a natural form, being from a form that remains in that to which it gives its essence, denotes a principle of action according only as it has the inclination to an effect. And likewise, the intelligible form does not denote a principle of action, in so far as it resides in the one who understands it, unless there is added to it an inclination to an effect, which inclination is through the will. Since the intelligible form has a relation to opposite things, inasmuch as the same knowledge relates to the opposites, it would not produce a determinate effect unless it were determined to one thing by the appetite, as the philosopher says. Now, it is manifest that God causes things by his intellect, since his being is an act of understanding, and hence his knowledge must be the cause of things, insofar as his will is joined to it. Hence, the knowledge of God as the cause of things is usually called the, quote, knowledge of approbation, end quote. Article 9. Whether God has knowledge of things that are not. Objection 1. It seems that God has not knowledge of things that are not. For the knowledge of God is of true things, but truth and being are convertible terms. Therefore, the knowledge of God is not of things that are not. Reply to objection 1. Those things are not actually are true, insofar as they are in potentiality. For it is true that they are potentiality, and as such are known by God. Objection 2. Further, knowledge requires likeness between the knower and the thing known. But those things that cannot have any likeness to God, who is very being. Therefore, what is not cannot be known by God. Reply to objection 2. Since God is the very being of everything, insofar as it participates in the likeness of God, everything is hot, as everything is hot insofar as it participates in heat, so things in potentiality are known by God, although they are not in act. Objection 3. Further, the knowledge of God is the cause of what is known by him, but is not the cause of things that are not, because a thing that is not has no cause. Therefore, God has no knowledge of things that are not. Reply to objection 3. The knowledge of God, joined to his will, is the cause of things. Hence, it is not necessary that whatever God knows is or was or will be, but only what is necessary as regards what he wills to be or permits to be. Further, it is in the knowledge of God not that they be, but that they are possible. The Apostle says, quote, "Who calleth those things that are not so as they are?" End quote. Romans 4:17. I answer that. God knows all things whatsoever that they are in any way. God knows all things whatsoever that they in any way are. Now, it is possible that things are not absolutely, should be in a certain sense. For things absolutely, which are actual, whereas things which are not actual are in the power of God himself or in a creature, whether in active power or passive, whether in power of the imagination or of thought, or of any other manner of means whatsoever. Whatever therefore can be made, or thought, or said by the creature, as also whatever he himself can do, are all known to God, although they are not actual, and insofar as it can be said that he has knowledge even of things that are not. Now, a certain difference is to be noted in the consideration of those things that are not actual. For though some of them may not be in act now, still they will be, or they were. And God is said to know all of these with knowledge of vision. For since God's act of understanding, which is his being, is measured by eternity, and since eternity is without succession, comprehending all time, the present glance of God extends over all time, and to all things which exist in any time, as to objects present him. But there are other things in God's power, or the creatures, which nevertheless are not nor will be, nor were, and as regards to these, he is had to have knowledge, not of vision, but of simple intelligence. This is so called because these things we see around us have distinct being outside the seer. Article 10. Whether God knows evil things. Objection 1. It seems that God does not know evil things, for the philosopher says that the intellect, which is not in potentiality, does not know privation, but, quote, evil is the privation of good, end quote, as Augustine says. Therefore, as the intellect of God is never in potentiality, but always in act, as is clear from the foregoing, it seems that God does not know evil things. Reply to objection 1. The saying of the philosopher must be understood as meaning that the intellect, which is not in potentiality, does not know privation existing in it. And this agrees with what is said previously, and that a point and every indivisible thing are known by privation of division. This is because simple and indivisible forms are in our intellect, not actual, but only potentiality. For they were actual in our intellect, and they would not be known by privation. Thus, it is simple things are known by separate substances. God, therefore, knows evil, not by privation existing in himself, but by the opposite of good. But by the opposite good. Objection 2. Further, all knowledge is either the cause of the thing known or is caused by it. But the knowledge of God is not the cause of evil, nor is it caused by evil. Therefore, God does not know evil things. Reply to objection 2. The knowledge of God is not the cause of evil, but is the cause of good, whereby evil is known. Objection 3. Further, everything known is known either by its likeness or by its opposite. But whatever God knows, he knows through his essence, as is clear from the foregoing. Now, the divine essence, neither is it the likeness of evil, nor is contrary to it. For the divine essence, there is no contrary, as Augustine says. Therefore, God does not know evil things. Reply to objection 3. Although evil is not supposed to be to the divine essence, which is not corruptible by evil, it is opposed to the effects of good, which he knows by his essence, and knowing them, he knows the opposite evils. Objection 4. Further, what is known through another and not through itself is imperfectly known. But evil is not known by God, for the thing known must be in the knower. Therefore, if evil is known through another thing, namely through good, it would be in him imperfectly, which cannot be, for the knowledge of God is not imperfect. Therefore, God does not know evil things. Reply to objection 4. To know a thing by something else only belongs to imperfect knowledge, if that thing is of itself knowable. But evil is not of itself knowable, forasmuch as the very nature of evil means the privation of good. Therefore, evil can neither be defined or known except by good. On the contrary, it is written in Proverbs 15:11, quote, "Hell and destruction are before God," end quote. I answer that whoever knows a thing perfectly must know all that can be accidental to it. Now, there are some good things which are known corrupt. There are some good things to which corruption by evil may be accidental. Hence, God would not know good things perfectly unless he knew evil things. Now, a thing is knowable in the degree which it is known. Hence, since this essence of evil, that is the privation of good, by the fact that God knows good, he knows evil things also, as by light is known by darkness. Hence, Dionysius says, quote, God through himself receives the division of darkness, not otherwise seeing darkness except through light. End quote. Article 11. Whether God knows singular things. Objection 1. It seems that God does not know singular things, for the divine intellect is more immaterial than the human intellect. Now, the human intellect, by reason of its immateriality, does not know singular things, but as the philosopher says, quote, reason has to do with universals, sense with singular things, end quote. Therefore, God does not know singular things. Reply to objection 1. Our intellect abstracts the intelligible species from the individualizing principles. Hence, The intelligible species in our intellect cannot be in the likeness of the individual principles, and on that account our intellect does not know the singular. But the intelligible species in the divine intellect, which is the essence of God, is immaterial not by abstraction, but of itself, being the principle of all the principles which enter into the composition of things, whether the principles of the species or principles of the individual. Hence, by it God knows not only universally, but also the singular things. Objection 2. Further, in us those faculties alone know the singular, which receive the species not abstracted from material conditions. But in God, things are in the highest degree abstracted from materiality. Therefore, God does not know singular things. Reply to objection 2. Although, as regards the species in the divine intellect, it has no material conditions, like the images received in the imagination and the sense, yet its power extends to both immaterial and material things. Objection 3. Further, all knowledge comes about through the medium of some likeness, but the likeness of singular things, insofar as they are singular, does not seem to be in God, for the principle of singularity is matter, which, since it is potentiality only, is altogether unlike God, who is pure act. Therefore, God cannot know singular things. Reply to objection 3. Although matter, as regards its potentiality, recedes from the likeness to God, yet even so far as it has its being in this wise, it retains a certain likeness to the divine being. On the contrary, it is written, quote, "All the ways of a man are open to his eyes," end quote, Proverbs 16:12. I answer that God knows singular things, for all perfections found in creatures pre-exist in God in a higher way, as is clear from the foregoing. Now, to know singular things is part of our perfection. Hence, God must know singular things. Even the philosopher considers it incongruous that anything known by us should be unknown to God. And thus, against Empedocles, he argues that God would be most ignorant if he did not know discord. Now, the perfections, which are divided among inferior beings, exist simply and unitedly in God. Hence, although by one faculty we know the universal and the immaterial, and by another we know singular and material things, nevertheless God knows both by a simple intellect. Now, some wishing to show how this can be, said that God knows singular things by universal causes, for nothing exists in a singular thing that does not arise from some universal cause. They give the example of an astrologer who knows all the universe movements from the heavens and can thence foretell all the eclipses that are to come. This, however, is not enough, for singular things from the universal causes attain to certain forms and powers which, however they may be joined together, are not individualized except by individual matter. Hence, he who knows Socrates because he is white, or because he is the son of Sophocles, or because of something of that kind, would not know him insofar as he is this particular man. Hence, according to the aforesaid mode, God would not know singular things in their singularity. On the other hand, others have said that God knows singular things by the application of universal causes to the particular effects. But this will not hold. For as much as no one can apply a thing to another unless he first knows the thing, hence the said application cannot be the reason of knowing for the particular, for it presupposes the knowledge of a singular things. Therefore, it must be otherwise said, that since God is the cause of things by his knowledge, as stated above, his knowledge extends as far as his causality extends. Hence, as the active power of God extends not only to forms, which are the source of universality, but also to matter, as we shall prove further on, the knowledge of God must extend to singular things, which are individualized by matter. For since he knows things other than himself by his essence, as being the likeness of things, or as their active principle, his essence must be the sufficing principle of knowing all things made by him, not only in the universal, but also in the singular. This same would apply to the knowledge of the artificer, if it were the productive of the whole thing, and not only of the form. Article 12. Whether God can know infinite things. Objection 1. It seems that God cannot know infinite things, for the infinite, as such, is unknown, since the infinite is that to which, quote, To those who measure it, it leaves something always more to be measured, end quote, as the philosopher says. Moreover, Augustine says, quote, that whatever is comprehended by knowledge is bounded by the comprehension of the knower, end quote. Now, infinite things have no boundary, therefore they cannot be comprehended by the knowledge of God. Reply to objection 1. The idea of the infinite pertains to quantity, as the philosopher says, but the idea of quantity implies order of parts. Therefore, to know the infinite, according to the mode of the infinite, is to know part after part. In this way, the infinite cannot be known. Whatever quantity of parts has been taken, there will always remain something else outside. But God does not know the infinite or the infinite things as if he enumerated part after part, since he knows all things simultaneously, and not successively, as said above. Hence, there is nothing to prevent him from knowing infinite things. Objection 2. Further, if we say something is infinite in themselves, if we say some things are infinite in themselves, are finite in God's knowledge, against this it must be urged that the essence of the infinite is that it is untraversable, and that the finite is traversable, as is said in physics. But the infinite is not traversable, either by the finite or by the infinite, as is proved in physics. Therefore, the infinite cannot be bounded by the finite, nor even by the infinite, and so the infinite cannot be finite in God's knowledge, which is infinite. Reply to objection 2. Transition imports a certain succession of parts, and hence it is in that infinite cannot be traversed by the finite nor by the infinite. But equality suffices for comprehension, because it is said to be comprehended, which has nothing outside the comprehender. Hence, it is not against the idea of the infinite to be comprehended by the infinite. And so, what is in the infinite itself can be called finite to the knowledge of God as comprehended, but not as if it were traversable. Objection 3. Further, the knowledge of God is measured by what is known, but is contrary to the essence of the infinite to be measured. Therefore, the infinite things cannot be known by God. Reply to objection 3. The knowledge of God is measured of things, not quantitatively, for the infinite is not subject to that kind of measure, but it is the measure of the essence and truth of things. For everything has truth of nature according to the degree in which it imitates the knowledge of God, as a thing made by art agrees with the art. Granted, however, an actual infinite number of things, for instance, an infinitude of men, or an infinitude of the continuous quantity, as an infinitude of air, as some of the ancients held, yet it is manifest that these would have a determinate and finite being, because their knowledge would be limited to some determinate nature. Hence, they would be measurable as regards the knowledge of God. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, although we cannot number the infinite, nevertheless it can be comprehended by those whose knowledge has no bounds. I answer that. Since God knows not only things actual, but things possible to him or created things, as shown in the above article, and as these must be infinite, it must be held that he knows infinite things. Although the knowledge of vision, which has only relation to things that are, or will be, or were, is not of infinite things, as some say, for we do not say the world is eternal, nor that generation and momentum will go on forever, so that individuals will be infinitely multiplied. Yet, if we consider more attentively, we must hold that God knows infinite things, even by the knowledge of vision. For God knows even the thoughts and affections of hearts, which are multiplied to infinity as rational creatures go on forever. The reason of this is to be found in the fact that the knowledge of every knower is measured by the mode of the form which the principle of knowledge. For the sensible image is in sense the likeness of only one individual thing, and can give the knowledge of one individual only. But the intellectual species of our intellect is the likeness of the thing as regards its specific nature, which is principled by infinite particulars, which is participated by infinite particulars. Hence, our intellect, by the intellectual species of man, in a certain way knows the infinite men. However, not as distinguished from each other, but as communicating in the nature of the species. And the reason is because the intelligible species of our intellect is the likeness of man, not as to the individual principles, but as to the principles of the species. On the other hand, the divine essence, whereby the divine intellect understands, is a sufficing likeness of all things that are or can be, not only as regards the universal principles, but also regards the principles proper to each one, as shown above. Hence, it follows that the knowledge of God extends to infinite things, even as distinct from each other. Article 13. Whether the knowledge of God is of future contingent things. Objection 1. It seems that the knowledge of God is not of future contingent things, for from a necessary cause proceeds a necessary effect. But the knowledge of God is the cause of things known, as said above. Since therefore the knowledge is necessary, what he knows must also be necessary. Therefore the knowledge of God is not contingent things. It's not of contingent things. Reply to objection 1. Although the supreme cause is necessary, the effect must be contingent by reason of that proximate contingent cause, just as the germination of a plant is contingent by the reason of the proximate contingent cause, although the momentum of the sun, which is the first cause, is necessary. So likewise things are known by God are contingent on account of their proximate causes, while the knowledge of God, which is the first cause, is necessary. Objection 2. Further, every conditional proposition, of which the antecedent is absolutely necessary, must have an absolutely necessary consequence, or consequent. For the antecedent is to the consequent as the principles are to conclusion. And from necessary principles, only necessary conclusion can follow, as is said in Porster. But this is a true conditional proposition. Quote, if God knew that if God knew that this thing will be, it will be, end quote. For the knowledge of God is only of true things. Now the antecedent conditional of this absolutely necessary. Now the antecedent conditional of this is absolutely necessary, because it is eternal, and because it is signified as the past. Therefore the consequent is absolutely necessary. Therefore whatever God knows is necessary. And so the knowledge of God is not of contingent things. Reply to objection 2. Some say that this antecedent, quote, God knew this contingent to be the future, end quote, is not necessary, but contingent, because although it is past, still it imports relation to the future. This, however, does not remove necessity from it, for whatever has relation to the future must have had it, although the future sometimes does not follow. On the other hand, some say that this antecedent is contingent because it is a compound of a necessary and contingent, as this saying is, quote, Socrates is a white man, end quote. But this also is to no purpose. For when we say, quote, God knew this contingent to be future, end quote, contingent is used here only as the matter of the word, and not as the chief part of the proposition. Hence, contingency or necessity has no reference to necessity or contingency of the proposition, or as to its true or false. For it may be just as true that I said a man is an ass, as that I said Socrates runs, or God is. Now, and the same applies to necessary and contingent. Hence it must be said that this antecedent is absolutely necessary. Nor does it follow, as some say, that the consequent is absolutely necessary, because the antecedent is the remote cause of the consequent, which is contingent by reason of the proximate cause. But this is to no purpose, for the conditional would be false were its antecedent the remote cause, and the consequent a contingent effect, as for example, I said, quote, if the sun moves, the grass will grow, end quote. Therefore, we must reply otherwise, that when the antecedent contains anything belonging to an act of the soul, the consequent must be taken not as in itself, but as if it was in the soul. For the existence of a thing in itself is different from the existence of a thing in a soul. For example, when I say, quote, what the soul understands is immaterial, end quote. This is to be understood that the immaterial as is in the intellect, not as it is in its like self, not as it is in itself. Likewise, if I say, quote, if God knew anything, it will be, end quote, the consequent must be understood as it is subject to divine knowledge, i.e., as it is in its presentiality, and thus it is necessary, as also is in the antecedent, quote, for everything that is, while it is, must necessarily be, end quote, as the philosopher says. Objection 3. Further, everything known by God must necessarily be, because even what ourselves know must necessarily be, and of course the knowledge of God is much more certain than ours, but no future contingent things must necessarily be. Therefore, no contingent future is known by God. Reply to objection 3. Things reduced to time act as known by us in successive time, but by God are known in eternity, which is above time. Whence to us they cannot be certain, forasmuch as we know future contingent things as such, but are certain to God alone, whose understanding is in eternity above time. Just as he who goes along the road does not see those who come after, whereas he who sees the whole road from a height sees at once all traveling by the way. Hence it is known by us what is known by us must be necessary, even as it is in itself. For what is future contingent in itself cannot be known by us, whereas what is known by God must be necessary according to the mode in which they are subject to the divine knowledge, as already stated, but not absolutely as considered in their own cause. Hence also this proposition, quote, everything known by God must necessarily be, end quote, is usually distinguished. For this may be referred to the thing or to the saying. If it refers to the thing, then it is divided and false. For the sense, for this, for the sense is, quote, everything which God knows is necessary, end quote. If understood of this saying, it is composite and true. For the sense is, quote, this proposition, that which is known by God is necessary, end quote. Now, some urge an objection and say that this distinction holds good with regard to forms that are separable from the subject. Thus, if I said, quote, it is possible for a white thing to be black, end quote, it is false as applied to the saying, and true as applied to the thing. For a thing which is white can become black, whereas the saying a white thing is black can never be true. But in forms that are inseparable from this subject, this distinction does not hold. As for instance, if I say, a black crow can be white, for in both senses it is false. Now, to be known by God is inseparable from a thing, for what is known by God cannot be known. This objection, however, would hold if these words, quote, that which were known, end quote, implied any disposition inherent to the subject. But since they are import and act of the knower, something can be attributed to the thing known in itself, even if it always be known, which is not attributed to it insofar as it stands under actual knowledge. Thus, material existence is attributed to a stone in itself, which is not attributed to it inasmuch as it is known. On the contrary, it is written, he who hath made the hearts of every one of them, who will understand all their works. Psalm 32:15, i.e., men. Now, the works of men are contingent, being subject to free will. Therefore, God knows contingent things. I answer that. It was shown above, God knows all things, not only things actual, but also things possible to him and creature. And since some of these future things contingent to us, it follows that God knows future contingent things. It is evident of this. In evidence of this, we must consider that a contingent thing can be considered in two ways. First, in itself, insofar as it is now in act, and in this sense is not considered future but as present. Neither it is considered as contingent, as having reference to one or of two terms, but as determined to one. On account of this, it can be on account of this, it can be infallibly the object of certain knowledge. For instance, to the sense of sight, as when I see that Socrates is sitting down, in another way contingent that a thing can be considered as it is in its cause, and in this way it is considered as future, and as a contingent thing, not yet determined to be one, forasmuch as a contingent cause has relation to opposite things. And in this sense, a contingent thing is not subject to any certain knowledge. Hence, whoever knows a contingent effect, in its only cause, has a merely conjectural knowledge of it. Now God knows all contingent things, not only as they are in their causes, but also as each one of them is in itself actually. And although contingent things become actually successive, nevertheless God knows contingent things, not successively, but as they are their own being, as we do, but simultaneously. The reason is because his knowledge is measured by eternity, as is his being. But eternity being simultaneously, wholly comprises all things, as said above. Hence, all things that are in time are present to God from eternity, not only because he has the types of things present within him, as some say, but because his glance is carried from eternity over all things, as they are in their presentality. Hence, it is manifest that contingent things are infallibly known by God, inasmuch as they are subject to the divine sight in their presentiality. Yet, they are future contingent things in relation to their own causes. Article 14. Whether God knows inequable things. Objection 1. It seems that God does not know inequable things. For to know inequable things belongs to our intellect, as it composes and divides. But in the divine intellect there is no composition. Therefore God does not know inequable things. Reply to objection 1. This objection would avail if God knew unequal things after the manner of unequal things. Objection 2. Further, every kind of knowledge is made through some likeness, but in God there is no likeness of unequal things, since he is altogether simple. Therefore, God does not know unequal things. Reply to objection 2. Enucatory composition signifies some existence of a thing, and thus God, by his existence, which is his essence, is the similitude of all those things which are signified by the enunciation. On the contrary, it is written, quote, "The Lord knoweth the thoughts of men," end quote, Psalm 93:11. But unequal things are contained in the thoughts of men. Therefore God knows unequal things. I answer that, since it is the power of our intellect to form enunciations, and since God knows whatever is in his own power or in the creatures, as said above, it follows of necessity that God knows all enunciations that can be formed. Now, just as he knows material things and immateriality, he and composes things simply, so likewise he knows inequable things, not after the manner of inequable things, as if his intellect were the composition or division of enunciations. For he knows each thing by simple intelligence, by understanding the essence of each thing, as if we by the very fact understand that what a man is, or to understand all that can be predicated of a man. This, however, does not happen in our intellect, which discourses from one thing to another, for as much as the intelligible species represents one thing in such a way as not to represent another. Hence, when we understand what a man is, we do not forthwith understand other things which belong to him, but we understand them by one according to a certain succession. On this account, the things which we understand as separate we must reduce to one by way of composition or division, by forming an enunciation. Now, the species of the divine intellect, which is God's essence, suffices to represent all things. Hence, by understanding his essence, God knows the essence of all things, and also whatever can be accidental to them. And we will continue with Article 15, whether the knowledge of God is variable, tomorrow. Thank you for making it this far, and as always, I hope you have a very blessed day.